Saturday mornings in our Capitol Hill home were usually lazy, quiet in a comfortable way. But that morning was quiet in a different sense, unnervingly still, like the silence right before a storm. I woke up earlier than usual, no alarm, no reason, just a feeling. And from the second my feet hit the hardwood floor, something felt wrong. I made my way to the kitchen, expecting the smell of coffee or the sound of Brooke humming to herself. Instead, I found her standing there, barefoot in a black sports bra and leggings, her hair still damp like she had just stepped out of the shower but hadn't bothered to finish getting ready. She didn't see me at first, she was too absorbed in whatever was on her phone. Then I saw it. Just a flash, before she tilted the screen away. A photo, her, in a black bikini, standing next to a man in a hotel robe, drink in hand. His arm was around her waist like it belonged there. And Brooke? She was smiling. That easy, relaxed smile I hadn't seen in a long time. She noticed me a second later and nearly dropped the phone. Her whole body stiffened. Then, like a switch flipped, she turned on this overly sweet, forced cheeriness. "Hey babe, you're up early," she said, laughing nervously, locking her phone with a tap that felt a little too practiced. "I was just texting Lauren about that yoga class, we might go next weekend." Her words tumbled out so fast I barely processed them. And then, just like that, she grabbed a towel and disappeared into the bathroom again, leaving me standing in the kitchen alone. That photo, that reaction, the way she tried to plaster over everything with fake brightness, it all sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that it was a misunderstanding. But something deep in me stirred, something primal. The kind of instinct you can't logic your way out of. Whatever this was, it had already begged *N. I stood in the kitchen long after Brooke disappeared into the shower. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. That photo, her bikini, that hotel robe, the drink in his hand kept replaying in my mind. It had felt like catching a glitch in a movie. A frame that wasn't meant to be seen. She had smiled in that photo. Not the smile she gave me lately, the polite, weary version, but something unguarded. Familiar in a way that scared me. I sat down at the table, barely aware I was doing it. My mind started pulling threads, rewinding months in reverse, examining moments I'd brushed off as harmless or confusing. Now, they seemed too neatly connected, like parts of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was holding. First, there were the trips. Brooke had started taking weekend work retreats about 3 months ago. Not every weekend, but just often enough to throw off the rhythm of our life. She said she was being asked to lead new projects and her company was investing in her potential. I'd been proud at first. She worked in marketing and I knew how competitive it was. But then she stopped putting the events on our shared calendar. That used to be her thing, color-coded events, synced across our devices, even travel reminders. The first time I asked why her Seattle conference wasn't on the calendar, she told me she hadn't had time to add it. She laughed and said, "Relax, Alex. I'm not planning a secret life." I remember chuckling at the time, but the memory of her exact phrasing now sat heavy in my gut. Then there was the new phone habit. Late-night scrolling in bed had always been a shared ritual, me reading the news, her browsing Pinterest. But it changed. She started angling the screen away. At first, I assumed it was work emails or something personal. Once, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the glow of her screen lighting up our bedroom ceiling. She was lying there, smiling faintly, totally absorbed. I asked what she was looking at. She said, "Just some lemon pasta recipes." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative, that my wife was lying in bed with me while texting someone else in the dark, felt too cruel, too absurd. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact shift in her mood. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. She became lighter, almost. Like someone carrying a secret that made them feel powerful. Or maybe just distracted. She wasn't cruel or cold. She was just somewhere else. She'd sit on the couch next to me but wouldn't really be with me. I remember watching a movie with her, something we used to love doing together, and realizing halfway through that she hadn't looked at the screen in over 10 minutes. She was staring at her phone, smiling at something. When I asked her if she wanted to pause the movie, she said, "No, I'm listening." But she wasn't. She'd been somewhere else for a while. There were other signs too. Little things. She started dressing differently, more effort, more subtle elegance. I noticed new lingerie folded in the laundry, pieces I hadn't seen her wear. When I asked if she got new stuff, she brushed it off. "Just a few upgrades," she said, like it wasn't even worth discussing. That wasn't like her. She used to ask for my opinion when she shopped, modeling outfits with mock runway walks across the living room. Her routines changed. She took longer showers. She started going to a new gym, one further away but less crowded. She used to play music in the mornings while getting ready, usually some indie playlist with soft acoustic vibes. Now she got ready in silence, often with the bathroom door closed. Even the way she hugged me changed. Less natural, more cautious. Like she was afraid I'd notice something. But I didn't want to notice. I kept trying to find explanations that made sense. Stress, work, a phase? Maybe she was just emotionally burnt out and I was reading too much into it. We had been together for almost 6 years, people change, right? I told myself we just needed a weekend together, some time to reset. I even booked a getaway once. Just a little trip to the coast, a bed and breakfast with a view. She canceled the night before, saying her manager had moved up a presentation. I remember the way she kissed me goodbye that morning on the cheek. No eye contact. No I love you. She didn't even ask if I'd be okay staying home alone. That weekend, she didn't post anything online. Nothing on her story. Nothing from the office. I remember lying awake in bed, the wind rustling through the trees outside, and wondering why the person I loved most in the world suddenly felt like a stranger. Still, I said nothing. I buried the suspicion. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband who reads too much into things, who asks too many questions and ends up driving someone away. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I was so focused on being the easygoing partner that I didn't notice the moment she started slipping away. One night a few weeks ago, we had a fight. Not even a big one. Just a disagreement over dinner, something dumb about what to order. She got defensive, then quiet. Eventually, she stood up from the table and said, "Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe in here." In here, like our home was suffocating her. I didn't know what to say. I asked if she wanted space and she said no. Then she walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and didn't talk to me for the rest of the night. The next morning, it was like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the forehead, said she loved me, and left for work. And I believed her. Because I wanted to. But now, with that photo burned into my brain, I couldn't unsee it. The robe, the drink, the easy way they stood next to each other, it didn't look like a casual interaction. It looked like routine. Like familiarity. And that made everything snap into place. The silence. The changed routines. The careful distance she'd been creating for months. She hadn't just started cheating last night. This had been happening slowly. Gradually. Like someone closing a door 1 inch at a time. And I hadn't noticed until it was almost shut. There was a part of me, maybe the last part, that still wanted to be wrong. That clung to the idea that maybe it was just a misunderstanding. That maybe she had an explanation that would make sense of everything. But another part of me, deeper and older and harder to lie to, knew the truth already. I didn't need more evidence. What I needed now was clarity. And that meant I had to stop pretending this was still the same marriage it used to be. There's a moment, just after doubt becomes certainty, when everything inside you goes still. Like your mind finally runs out of excuses and the last thread of denial snaps. That moment came for me the day after I saw the photo, when I decided to stop playing defense and started looking for the truth. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious. Coldly curious. And that was worse in a way. Because when you lose the desire to believe, you stop protecting people from the weight of their own decisions. I didn't confront Brooke. Not immediately. Instead, I reached out to Jared. Jared and I had been friends since college. He worked IT security for a chain of upscale hotels around the city, mostly dull, corporate work. We hadn't talked much lately, but he was one of those rare people you could call out of the blue after months and it wouldn't be weird. I texted him casually. "Hey man, got a weird favor. Need you to help me look something up." He called almost instantly. "What kind of favor we talking?" "I think Brooke might have been staying at a hotel recently. Near Lake Washington. I just want to confirm a name. Just a name. Nothing more." He hesitated. "That's borderline, dude." I sighed. "I know. But I need to know if I'm crazy or not. Please." There was a pause. Then, "All right. I'll see what I can find. You didn't get this from me." I gave him Brooke's full name and the rough dates from a few weekends ago. I didn't tell him about the photo, or the way she'd brushed past me that morning like everything was fine. I didn't tell him that I hadn't been able to sleep since. I just waited. The next morning, Jared sent me a single text. "Yep. Waterfront hotel. Booked Friday through Sunday. 2 guests. 1 king bed. Second guest listed. Tom Harris." Tom Harris. The name didn't mean anything at first. Then it hit me, Tom. The man in the robe from the photo. The man holding the drink. The one with his arm around her waist like it belonged there. My hands went cold. It wasn't just suspicion now. It was real. Verified. Official. Like flipping a switch that couldn't be unflipped. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the name on the screen. It's strange how quickly your mind rewrites the past when the truth becomes undeniable. I could suddenly feel every time she had lied to me, could hear the difference in her voice. I remembered when she'd come home late that Sunday. Flushed, a little too talkative, apologizing for being so wiped out from the seminar. I remembered the way she had hugged me absent-mindedly, still scrolling her phone behind my back. That weekend hadn't been a seminar. It had been him. I don't remember deciding what to do next, exactly. Felt instinctual, mechanical. I walked upstairs, into our bedroom, and pulled her travel suitcase from the closet. It was still there, tucked behind a pair of old boots. I opened it. Empty, except for a spare toothbrush and a folded laundry receipt. I closed it gently, then took out a notepad and a pen. I wrote her a note. Nothing long. No accusations. Just a message. I saw the photo. I know about the hotel. I know about him. Don't explain. I'm not asking for an apology. Just remember, every lie has a timestamp. Alex. I folded the note in half and slid it into the lining of the suitcase. Somewhere she'd find it when she started packing again. And I knew she would, whether for another trip or for something else entirely. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a mirror. Let her see herself in it. When she got home later that night, I pretended everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I'd eaten. I said I had. She told me about her client meeting, something about rebranding a skincare startup. I nodded, smiled. She didn't suspect a thing. Her lie had already run its course, and I didn't owe her the dignity of a confrontation she hadn't earned. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. My hand rested inches from hers, but it may as well have been miles. We had been living in the same space, but in different realities. I was building a life with her. She was building an escape route with someone else. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the quiet ways betrayal shows up. Through canceled plans, distant eyes, rushed explanations. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just sits there, politely sipping coffee across from you at breakfast, smiling like it still loves you. The next morning, she packed for another retreat. I watched her move through the room, selecting clothes from her closet, carefully folding sweaters, picking out shoes with the kind of detail she used to reserve for our anniversary dinners. She packed sunscreen. I remember that. It was supposed to rain all weekend. She smiled at me while she zipped the suitcase shut. "Want me to bring you back anything?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm good." And I was. For the first time in a long time, I was clear. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was done. She left around noon. I stood by the front window and watched her car disappear around the corner. When I turned around, the house felt quieter than it ever had. But I didn't feel alone. I felt awake. And that was the beginning of the end. Not the moment she cheated. Not the moment I found out. But this one. The moment I stopped pretending it was still worth saving. Brooke came home early. That alone would have been enough to raise alarms. But it wasn't just the timing. It was everything about her. Her face was flushed, her eyes puffy, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, and the suitcase she usually tucked away immediately after coming home sat unopened by the door. She walked in and froze when she saw me sitting at the dining table. It was late afternoon. I'd made a point of being visible. I wanted her to know I was waiting. "Hey," she said, voice light, a little too rehearsed. "You're home early." "You too," I replied, calm but not warm. She hesitated in the doorway like she was weighing which version of herself to present. Cheerful Brooke or honest Brooke. In the end, she settled for something vague and brittle. I didn't feel great, so I cut the trip short. "Something happen?" She blinked a few times, sat down across from me, and folded her hands like a student giving a presentation. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said. "About us." I said nothing. Let the silence do the talking. She took a breath and launched into it. "I haven't been fair to you. I've been distant, I know. You've probably noticed. And these trips, the time apart, it made me realize I've been confused. Emotionally, She said it like it was a scheduling issue. She went on, offering abstract phrases like drifting apart and questioning everything. At one point she said, "You're such a steady presence, so dependable," as if that were a flaw, as if that somehow justified the mess unraveling between us. She talked like someone who had rehearsed this speech in her head a dozen times. Someone who thought the right combination of vulnerability and ambiguity would soften the landing. I let her speak, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to hear how much of the truth she was willing to say out loud. She danced around words like affair or Tom, never once said his name. She said, "I don't know how we got here," and I wanted to laugh. We didn't get here, we were led. By her choices, her secrets. When she finally trailed off, I asked the only question that really mattered. "Why come back?" That caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked at her hands. Because I realized what I stood to lose. That at least sounded honest. But not for the reasons she thought. Because the truth was, she hadn't come back to fix anything. She came back because something on his end fell apart. You could see it in the panic she tried to hide behind soft smiles and half-whispered apologies. Her return wasn't a grand realization of love. It was retreat, a scramble, a plan that didn't go how she hoped. Maybe Tom backed out. Maybe he made it clear she was never going to be anything more than a secret in a hotel room. Maybe he got caught. Or maybe he was just done playing the game. Whatever it was, it shook her. And now she was sitting across from me, trying to make it look like she had the epiphany. "I want to work on us," she said. But it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "I just think we've both been not present, and I want to be more intentional about reconnecting." I nodded slowly, letting her talk. She seemed relieved by my silence, like she mistook it for agreement. She talked about counseling, about taking a break from work travel, about trying to rediscover what brought us together in the first place. I listened, still waiting, still watching. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. "I don't want this to define us." That's when I knew she still didn't get it. This was her definition. Not the one she was crafting with these soft, curated phrases, but the real one. The unspoken version. The one written in hotel bookings and secret texts and deleted calendar events. This wasn't a detour. It was a choice. A series of choices. And no amount of couples therapy or yoga retreats was going to scrub that out of the air between us. Still, I didn't call her out. Not then. Because confronting someone who's already halfway lying to themselves is like shouting at a mirror. It only reflects back the version they want to see. When she was done talking, she asked if I wanted to order takeout. "Thai, maybe." I said sure. She smiled. "Okay, I'll go freshen up." As she walked upstairs, I sat at the table and stared at the suitcase. It hadn't moved since she walked in. A red luggage tag dangled from the zipper. The zipper itself was slightly open, just enough to see a black dress folded inside. She had come home early, but she hadn't unpacked. I thought about the note I'd hidden in that bag, folded neatly, sitting just beneath the lining. She hadn't found it yet. When she did, I wondered if she'd say anything. Or if she'd pretend she never saw it, just like she was pretending now. That night, we ate pad thai on the couch. She asked about work. I answered politely. She laughed once, maybe twice, a little too loud. She touched my arm like it was a reflex, like muscle memory. It was surreal, like acting in a play where everyone forgot the script but refused to stop the performance. Later, she fell asleep on the couch, curled up in her hoodie, an untouched glass of wine still in her hand. I watched her for a long time, not out of affection, out of detachment, because I didn't recognize her anymore. Not just in the way she looked or talked, but in the way she seemed completely at peace, as if nothing had truly fractured, as if the house wasn't filled with ghosts. The next morning, she was cheerful again. She made eggs, played music in the kitchen, something upbeat, a song she hadn't listened to in years. She danced a little as she moved, like a woman returning to her old rhythm. I sipped my coffee in silence and waited to see if she'd mention the note. She didn't. That told me everything. The pretending hadn't collapsed for her yet. Not fully. But it had for me. And I knew soon I would act. The next morning I didn't feel heartbreak. I didn't feel anything at all, and that terrified me at first. But then I realized it was exactly what I needed. A clear head. No emotion, no panic, just forward motion. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't wondering what Brooke was hiding or waiting for her to slip up again. I had stopped trying to read between the lines. There was no code left to crack. I had the answer, and now I had decisions to make. I sat down at the dining table with a notebook and pen. I didn't open my laptop, didn't scroll my phone. Just paper, ink, and thought. I made a checklist. Not a dramatic one. No screaming headlines like divorce or revenge. Just a plain, numbered list. Actionable steps. Practical. Measured. Change passwords. Separate bank access. Talk to a lawyer. Secure backup housing. Find evidence, if needed. Exit plan. It wasn't a war plan. It was an extraction. I started with the small things. Changed my passwords, bank accounts, insurance portals, even the Netflix login. Not because I thought she'd try to sabotage me, but because I wanted control back. Little, quiet control. Next, I messaged Nate, an old friend from work who had mentioned he had a spare room open. I kept it vague. Hey man, might be looking to crash somewhere short term. You still renting that guest space? He replied an hour later. Absolutely. You okay? I typed out, yeah, just reconfiguring some things, and hit send. Reconfiguring. That's what it felt like. Like moving wires behind a wall. The exterior still looked whole, but the system was changing beneath the surface. That afternoon, when Brooke left for errands, I opened her old laptop, the one she used before switching to a company-issued MacBook. It was dusty, the charging cable tangled under the coffee table, like a forgotten relic from a different life. I plugged it in, powered it up, and waited. To my surprise, her email was still logged in. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But I wasn't there to punish her. I needed clarity. Closure. I had seen the photo. I had confirmation from Jared. But I wanted to know who Brooke had become when I wasn't looking. The inbox was a graveyard of normality. Promo codes, newsletters, flight confirmations, and then a folder, labeled simply, personal. Inside, I found email threads between her and Tom Harris. Not graphic, not explicit, but personal. Deeply so. Private jokes. Shared YouTube links. Jabs at marketing jargon. A recurring thread called Weird Client Moments. It read like two people building their own world, one where I didn't exist. But what hit me hardest were the references to me. She called me analytical to a fault. Once, in response to Tom complaining about his ex being emotionally chaotic, Brooke had written, "Well, Alex is the opposite. He'd probably make a spreadsheet to justify staying married." Tom replied, "Sounds exhausting. I don't know how you live like that." She answered, "Sometimes I don't either." That was the line that stuck. Not because it was cruel. Not because it was untrue. But because it was so casual. Like I was just a footnote in a story she'd already rewritten. I didn't read much more. There was no need. These weren't the words of someone caught in a single moment of weakness. This was a slow fade, an emotional relocation. She hadn't just cheated. She had left. Emotionally, mentally. She was already gone before her body ever followed. I shut the laptop, unplugged it, and slid it back under the table. No need to confront her with it. No need to drag it out. I wasn't planning a confrontation anymore. I was planning an exit. That night, we ate leftovers on the couch. She told me about a funny interaction at the pharmacy. I nodded, smiled at the right beats. She rested her head against my shoulder like nothing was broken. But I had already started packing. Not visibly, not physically, but mentally, my bags were already by the door. I began walking through the house in small circuits, identifying what I would take, what I would leave behind. I didn't want furniture. I didn't want the couch we picked out after our second anniversary. I didn't want the art she insisted on hanging above the fireplace. I wanted only what was mine. 2 backpacks, my laptop, my documents, A watch my father gave me when I graduated college. Everything else? Replaceable. I started backing up my files. Not just the essentials, contracts, financial statements, but photos too. The ones that still mattered. The ones from before all this started. The ones that felt honest. I also called a lawyer. Quietly. From the car. We didn't talk for long. I didn't go into detail. I just said I wanted to understand my options, just in case. She walked me through the basics. Said it was smart to be proactive. Asked if I had documentation. I said yes, but I didn't want to *p*nize it unless I had to. She said something that stuck with me. You don't need to fight for what's already gone. You just need to walk away clean. Clean. That was the goal? That night, I found myself lying awake again, except this time, there was no looping question in my mind. No desperation to understand her. No flicker of hope that maybe I was wrong. Just stillness. The kind of quiet that feels like a clearing after a storm. Brooke stirred beside me in her sleep, muttering something incoherent. I turned away. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt ready. 2 days later, I left. No drama. No argument. I packed quietly before sunrise, just 2 backpacks, my documents, laptop, and my dad's watch. Brooke was still asleep in the guest room, unaware. I placed my house key and a short note on the kitchen counter. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Then I walked out. I drove to Nate's, moved into his spare room, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. When I woke, there were missed calls and texts from Brooke. Where are you? Can we talk? Please. I didn't answer. She wasn't reaching for me, she was reaching for her guilt. I wasn't going to carry that anymore. She chose this. I chose peace. A week later, I drove to Montana alone. I'd never been, but I needed distance and air. The stillness there wasn't emptiness, it was clarity. I stayed in a cabin, kept to myself. I didn't post, didn't explain. I just existed. It wasn't escape, it was arrival. That trip didn't heal me instantly. But it severed the last threads of a life that wasn't mine anymore. Brooke had built an illusion, one where she could betray me and still expect forgiveness. Montana shattered that. And in its place, I found something simple. Not closure. Not resolution. Just freedom. And that finally was enough.